Hi, I'm Joan Leach, and I'm Professor and Director at the Australian National Centre for Public Awareness of Science. We colloquially at ANU call it CPAS. And I'd like to welcome you to explore some of the things that we have to offer. For those of you who grew up in Australia, you might have visited Questacon once or twice as a kid. Well, 30 years ago, Emeritus Professor Mike Gore founded Questacon, and it was nurtured at the ANU. And over the last 30 years, we have partnered with a number of organizations around the world and created an entire generation of science communicators. So we'd like to invite you to come and see what you've got in relation to science communication. So at CPAS, we have a suite of undergraduate offerings. You can take just a course, or if you really like us, you can take the full major. We have a minor, and for postgraduate students, we have a number of pathways into postgraduate study. So those are worth checking out, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go along. We also offer a vibrant PhD program. We have over 20 students at the moment studying all kinds of aspects of the science and society relationship. So if you're concerned about things like communicating climate change, if you're worried about what's going on right now, like we all are, in relation to COVID and public health, check us out. And also we have students who are working on miscommunication and people who are actually trying to make things better for scientists who communicate their work publicly. So we offer a range of things from skills courses to build your science communication skills through to research courses where you study what goes on in the science and society relationship, what makes it strong and what makes problems. So we hope we've got something for everybody. Now, in addition to being director of this fabulous center, I also, one of the best things I get to do is actually teach. And so in addition to coming in and teaching in some undergraduate courses for lectures, I also offer a postgraduate course, an introduction to science communication, where we look at some of the research results of the last 30 years from around the world to find out what's going on. What are people thinking when they look at new scientific developments like genetic modification or perhaps even quantum engineering? So we have a broad scope in that course where we look at the impacts that science has on society and how we can communicate not just those impacts, but also to people who might be doubtful and what might make them doubtful about science in the contemporary world. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're about, but I get to pass over to my colleague, Dr. Rod Lambert, to tell you a bit more.
Hi folks, my name's Rod. You probably already know that now. I'm the Deputy Director of the Centre for Public Awareness of Science. I've been playing in academic, SciComm and the related areas for about 22 years now, which is hard to believe because I know I only look about 24. So I'm an early adopter. And for me, SciComm's inspired by science, but it doesn't need to be full of science content. And this is something that we talk about a lot in the way we handle our courses. So it doesn't mean you ignore science, but it's sort of like the reverse. If you want to really get involved in science with people who aren't deeply involved themselves, you need to know a lot about it so you know what you can cut out. And to cut things out, you need to know a lot about your contexts. So we talk a lot about that in our courses, and particularly in mine, which I shall talk about in a moment. I'm particularly into what we would call, I suppose, experimental science communication. And by that I mean, I like to talk about science-related matters but in a more conversational space, like on the radio, in pub shows, or perhaps even in podcasts. And I'm a big fan of evidence-inspired advocacy and public intellectualism. So using SciComm research, skills and practice to help make a difference, to actually change things, as Joan flagged so well, climate change and indeed in this current moment, COVID and its related problems. So I run 3 courses at undergrad level, both first year courses, Scom 1001 and Scom 1002. The first one is called Science and Public Awareness, and in that we talk about storytelling. We talk about the place of science communication in advocacy and activism. You get to do a podcast as part of your assessment. We have guest lectures from our colleagues at CPAS who talk about science and the web, responsible and inclusive research, science shows and science centres, science and public policy. It's a smorgasbord of delicious SciComm goodness. In the second semester, scientific evidence and social change, we get a bit more down and dirty. So we start to look at case studies and some methods in SciComm. And the case studies cover things like Why might you not make bicycle helmet laws compulsory for everyone? Might that be better for the community? How would you make that argument? What kind of evidence is used to support or to fail to support drug laws? Do computer games melt our brains, or could they be used to fix them? And indeed, how much does pop psychology help us make sense of phenomena like Donald Trump? Finally, I do a course called Science, Risk and Ethics, and that can be taken as second year or indeed as a master's course. And this talks about risk communication, because risk communication is a huge area of research and practice, not just in psychom. So science evidence lies behind a lot of the way we confront and understand risks. Just think of the climate change that we're facing now, and indeed the pandemic. But in this course, we look at case studies, we look at theories, we appreciate how complex risk communication can be, and particularly how being told, just use the evidence, is actually not that useful. Just throw science at people and see what sticks is not a path that works. Behind this, we consider the ethical backdrop of what's going on, because to do good research and to do good science communication practice, you need to consider the right and proper thing to do, and that is rarely as straightforward as you might think. So I hope to see you virtually and maybe one day in person in the years to come. I shall now throw over to my colleague Sujatha.
Thank you. Thanks, Rod. Hello, my name is Sujatha Raman, and I'm Director of Research at CPAS. Now, I study how people make sense of scientific knowledge in very different ways, why that matters and what can be done about it. Now, when I say people, it could be a scientist running a lab, somebody working for government, writing for a newspaper, campaigning for social change, or maybe a member of the public trying to figure out what kind of mask to wear in the middle of a pandemic, right? And sometimes it could be one person doing all of those things. Now, when I went to university, I didn't know you could study such stuff. I did a bachelor's degree in physics in India. And then as a graduate student in the US, I discovered this emerging field of study that goes by various names: science, technology, and society, science communication, science and public policy, ethical dimensions of science, and so on. So I was really hooked because it gave me a chance to ask questions that I couldn't ask in physics. So I switched fields. And I must say I haven't regretted the decision, because after many years, it's led to my joining my wonderful colleagues in CPAS in 2018. In between, there was a small matter of doing a PhD at the University of Pittsburgh in the US, and then a stint in the UK at Lancaster University, and then later on at the University of Nottingham at an institute that's called the Institute for Science of Society. Now, at CPAS, I teach a course on cross-cultural approaches to science communication. This is something that runs at the third year undergraduate level, but also at the postgraduate level. And what we do in the course is we explore a number of concepts and themes that inform how we might talk about science, scientific knowledge, science society issues, given that we live in a world that's made up of different cultures. But also, even in any one country, there are very different ways in which we make sense of science. We don't all see science in the same way. So in the course, we have different pieces of assessment. We have 4 pieces of writing that students do. The main one is a report that you write for a stakeholder you might be interested in advising. So maybe this is somebody like a government regulator who has to figure out what to do about artificial intelligence. Maybe it could be a scientist trying to talk about their experiments in gene editing. A whole host of possibilities you can identify, but you have to tell them why and how they should be anticipating how other people might react to the science issues or science society issues that they want to raise. So why they should be taking a cross-cultural approach. So that's the main bit of assessment, but along the way you do 3 smaller pieces of work that will help you get there. And I must say, in terms of job opportunities, it's worth keeping in mind that when we think about science communication, we work in a very broad science sector. So the science sector consists not just of science or academics in universities, but also people in governments, professional associations, trade bodies, learned academies, obviously the media, business and industry, NGOs, and so on. And many of these people today are looking for someone who can talk about issues that connect science and society, but also do so in ways that are sensitive to cultural diversity. So that's what I do. And I'll now turn over to my colleague, Will, who will tell you more about CPAS.
Thank you so much, Sujatha. Hi, everyone. My name is Will Grant. I'm, again, one of the lecturers and researchers here at CPAS. Like Sujatha, I didn't know about science communication when I was a youth, an undergraduate student or a postgraduate student. I studied political science because I was fascinated about the ways societies make decisions, how we come together and choose what we'll do as a society, and how we come together and don't make good decisions. Eventually, I came to this point and I realized that, one of the central pieces here is that we make evidence as a society via science. And if we're not exploring the relationship between scientifically generated knowledge and how science, governments and societies make decisions, then we're missing a big trick here. So I've come to science communication as someone who comes from political science and then is keen to explore a lot of the aspects of the politics of science. And one of the biggest examples I always come up with, it's normally the #1 example in the world ever, but COVID has changed it a little bit these days, but it's the politics of climate change. How do we convince the world to take action on this key public policy challenges? You notice that many of my colleagues have already mentioned climate change. We at CPAS really want to understand how these issues are interfacing between societies making decisions and the science generating them. But one of the things that I've always really enjoyed about the field of science communication is that, perhaps unlike some other disciplines or my historical discipline where I came from, we're not just here to study and describe, but to intervene, to take action, to help, to make a difference in this world. And so what I've seen since I've been here at CPAS and been in the field of science communication is that we generate graduates, students, people coming out of our degree who go on to make a difference, who dive into advocacy organizations or government, or make their own personal contributions, where they're seeing if there are ways that they can get science into the political discussions where it should be. So the sorts of courses that you might see me in if you join with us in an undergraduate or postgraduate degree in science communication focus on some of these issues. So I teach a course on science politics where we explore a range of different things, including the politics of climate change, the politics of pill testing, or how we decide to make decisions on artificial intelligence. I also do a course on science communication on the web where we look at not only the flows of information, but some of the what's the best word here? Less than rational people out there on the internet who are generating counter ideas to science, and what we might do about that. How we in the scientific community and the science communication community might connect with audiences so that we can all have a better world. I also teach a public speaking course, speaking of science, and I convene an internships course, which is one of the most rewarding things that I've seen our undergraduate and postgraduate students go through. At the end of their degree, they get an opportunity to take up an internship with a science or science communication organization and deliver a real project where they can make a difference for that organization. Students have gone to places like the Academy of Science, or Science Technology Australia, or different organizations of government or CSIRO, delivered something that those organizations were not quite able to do, and then getting a real impact and putting that into their career and building a beautiful career from here. So from here, I'll hand over to my colleague, Dr. Marin Mckinnon, who will tell us a little bit more about some of the offerings we have at CPAS. Marin.
Thanks, Will. Hi, everyone. I am Marin, and unsurprisingly, I am one of the academic staff members at CPAS as well. Now, I actually started out as a marine scientist, and it was about halfway through my honours degree when I realised that the conservation goals I wanted to achieve really relied on me being able to engage people, to get them to care, to understand, to want to be a part of the solution. So at that time, I was counting intertidal snails on a rock platform and moving limpets with a paint scraper. Certainly encouraged people to ask questions of me or talk about me, but wasn't necessarily conducive to engaging them in something more meaningful. So I then started in science communication. I left marine science, my first love behind, and decided that science communication is where I wanted to be. I worked for about 10 years in a range of roles in science communication. So I worked for government, for private and not-for-profit organisations, both in Australia and around the world, and was doing things like developing events, running events, delivering science shows, developing communication strategies and working on capacity building projects. when I started in academia, I tended to use a lot of that professional experience to help build the courses that I taught, because there was a long list of things that I wished I knew when I started working. So I've used that experience to build up 2 courses, Science in the Media and Health Promotion, and I teach those at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. So if you come and do Science in the Media with me, you will learn how to do things like how to write a news article, what makes something interesting and engaging and relevant for a general audience or a very specific audience. You will also have the opportunity, undergraduates, you will act as consultants for an external organisation, actually doing an academic, as a communication project for an organisation that they will use in the real world. If you're doing it as a postgraduate, then you can do research, which we can try and actually get published in peer-reviewed journals. So you're actually contributing to the body of scientific knowledge that people then use to inform future work. In health promotion, again, this is very practically oriented, and you're probably seeing this as a theme in what everyone's been saying so far. So in health promotion, undergraduates and postgraduates, you will learn what goes into identifying a need, designing, delivering, and evaluating a health promotion project or a health promotion initiative. For the undergraduates, you will do that at your very own health fair. So you'll be working with real people, actively communicating information and engaging people in health issues. For the postgraduates, a lot of the students who come to this course tend to be working in public health in some capacity, and you'll gain skills like how to write a grant application and to understand how to engage people in contested and contentious issues. So for all of these things, it's all very much about what you need in the workforce, and where those things can take you really is quite limitless. Science communication is a really broad skill set that can pretty much take you anywhere. I'm going to hand you over now to my colleague, Dr. Graham Walker, who I actually met as a beginning student in science communication. So see, it does tend to stick. Over to you, Graham.
Thank you, Marin. I'm Dr. Graham Walker. I'm another part of the CPAS team working with Marin and everybody else, doing all sorts of things science communication. My particular passion, my jam, you might say, is informal science learning. So we're talking about things like science museums, science centres, going out, visiting schools, engaging the community, building things in maker spaces, all this kind of stuff that has a really big hands-on element, and really getting out there in the public, with the public. I did my PhD in this area, and I can attest that CPAS is a lovely place to do a PhD, and I did find myself sticking around. I looked at science shows in my PhD, something I'm really passionate about, and something that you'll find at CPAS in a big way is that we might be doing science communication at the core, but there's aspects of performance and drama and art, journalism, all these different ways, all these different tools that we can use to communicate, and we bring them all in. And for me, that's using live demonstrations, which I've been banned from doing on this webinar, but you can see some others. And really, bringing the science to life. So I did my PhD on science shows, and it's led into some teaching and some other projects. I've been fortunate enough to go all the way around the world doing this kind of stuff with CPAS, and very much sharing and learning from colleagues all around the world. We run 2 projects, Science Circus Pacific and Science Circus Africa, that kind of take these ways of communicating science, through science centres, hands-on exhibits, doing experiments yourself, and we share them with partners all around the world. We learn a lot from those partners, and we share a lot with them as well, and really resulting in, like you've heard from my colleagues, real impact on the ground. So we very much have a practical, hands-on focus, of course, evidence-based, of course, with all that academic rigour, but really the science communication that we like to do at CPAS is the kind of stuff that really makes a difference in people's everyday lives. And the courses I teach are very much geared at that as well. So I teach 2 courses. I teach a fieldwork unit where we work with our fabulous friends over at Questacon to send a group of master's students out all around Australia with the Questacon Science Circus. And this goes out to all kinds of places, into schools, the community, everything from kindergarten classes to Rotary groups, trying to bring science to life, trying to get people to engage with science themselves and get hands-on, and to get them to, you know, think about science differently. And so as a student experience, really fantastic, really intense year with a small group of other students. And it really can take you some amazing places. And like Marin was saying, with some real transferable skills. So you'll be learning how to communicate science through hands-on workshops or science shows or developing videos for social media. But you're going to learn things like, well, how do I present? How do I facilitate a group of people? And these are skills, whether you're after a science communication career or not, are really, really priceless. Just ways of connecting with other people and communicating. Assessment is really broad, and we really try to embed that into the real world science communication experience that you'll have. So I'll be, I really enjoy my marking because I might be watching videos of science shows. I might be looking at a plan of how you're going to create a workshop that's going to break down cultural barriers, address inclusion and diversity. So it's a really exciting course. And because of the industry link with Questacon, everything's embedded in the real world. And one of the beautiful outcomes for our graduates of that is you're instantly connected to a big network, which is part of everything that happens at CPAS. And that ends up with a lot of really practical and immediate job opportunities. The other course I teach, and it's tough competition, but this one is my favorite, is the Scom 3007, 6007 project design course. So you can take it as an undergraduate in third year or a postgraduate, and you get to create your own science communication projects. So from woe to go, we teach it in intensive, kind of throw you in a room for a week with a whole lot of really inspiring people, share some tools for creating projects and then implementing them. And then you go off and you turn your ideas into reality. So it gives you real practical, real world science communication experience, and to turn your ideas, not somebody else's, into something that's really going to make a difference. So you'll be assessed on how you can, be creative, how you can develop that, how you can implement it, evaluate it, and like Marin was saying, how you can fund it, win grants and pitch for funding. Such a key skill if you want your ideas to turn into something much bigger. Now, the thing I love about this course is we have some real fantastic real world stories. A lot of student projects start as an assignment, but end up as little social enterprises that have quite a big life after university. One of my favorites, Nix and Nelly, a project we had from a student a few years ago. She was really passionate about epilepsy, particularly in youth. You can imagine for a family with a young child that has epilepsy, really a confronting thing, hard to understand for the child, for the family. She worked in the web course that Will told you about to create an online presence to help people with that, and worked in my project design course to design a workshop where kids actually making little neurons to kind of break down a lot of the stigma around epilepsy and help families work with it a lot better. And that's gone on to be a social enterprise and student involved, traveling around, doing talks, running workshops. And this is long after the happy memories of CPAS are gone. So like a lot of the stuff we do here, a lot of our teaching is geared towards making a real world difference and doing SciComm in the public good. And that is very much what we're about. And on that note, I'll hand over to Lindy.
Thanks, Graham, and hi, everyone. My name's Lindy Orthia, and I'm a senior lecturer in science communication, obviously here at CPAS at the ANU. And I came to science communication a little late in life, but from a background in biology, creative writing, and political activism, three things that it turned out were a really good combination for science communication, because I came with some knowledge of science, of communication, and of people, and the politics of knowledge and how those things operate. Perhaps contrasting with that, though, I ended up doing my PhD in science communication on representations of science in Doctor Who. A little bit of a different take, but all of those things became important within that PhD project. But at the moment, one of my teaching and research passions is science communication history. And that's partly because it's played such a critical role in the history of science. Now, you may already know a lot about science history, but you may not know that public communication, similar to what we do in science communication today, has been incredibly important to science over the past few hundred years, and indeed over the many thousands of years that people have been doing science across the world. Now, to take a familiar example from British science history, not the only thing that we study, we study a lot of different scientific traditions, but a familiar example from British science history, you've probably heard of Charles Darwin, who's known for inventing the theory of evolution by natural selection. But have you heard of Alfred Russel Wallace, who developed the same idea at the same time? If you haven't heard of Wallace, or perhaps you have heard of him but can't name any of his publications or discuss any of his ideas, the reason for that, or one of the main reasons, is public communication, or rather the lack of it. So Darwin had influential opinion leaders promoting his name, his works, his ideas within wider British society and beyond, while Wallace didn't have friends in high places like that. And those dynamics, the communication dynamics and those dynamics of power shaped how the history of science unfolded, and basically which histories we've inherited today. And this example shows it's not just good ideas that matter in science. History shows us that how they're communicated can matter much more. And that story is similar for other times, places, and cultures across the globe. So if you're interested in this idea, or these ideas, and more, we explore them in my course, which is called Making Modern Science. And this course is available for postgraduates and undergraduates and can be taken fully online or in person, COVID permitting. And the major assignment for that course is researching science communication in whichever times, places, and cultures you're interested in. So it's a great opportunity to explore science communication from a historical perspective that's relevant to you and to your cultural heritage. And we've had students do assignments, for example, on 11th century Chinese science and on science during the Islamic Golden Age across the North Africa and the Middle East and more. We also talk about Indigenous Australian traditions of science communication within the course. There's lots of scope for new research in all of these areas. One last thing I'd like to mention, I also teach 2 courses in which postgraduate students and third-year undergraduates, respectively, can conduct their own or your own independent research projects within our field. And those projects are supervised by CPAS academics like us, including us, in some cases, on any topics of interest to science communication, from geology and Lord of the Rings to persuasive climate change communication strategies and more. If you're interested, you can look them up. Those courses are called Science Communication Research Project and Master of Science Communication Research Project, not very imaginative, but informative titles. So come along and follow your science communication passions with us. I look forward to meeting you soon. And over to Brad.
Hello. You're here listening to all these things online about what you're going to do next year and in 2 years. I want to give you more of an existential crisis. What are you doing in 5 to 10 years? Now, if you asked this question in 2015, sitting on the couch at home in 2020 probably wasn't the answer. But I guarantee if you're considering anything related to science, you're going to need to be able to communicate. In this week alone, I've done about 10 recommendations for government jobs, industry jobs, academic jobs from students. And all 10 of those asked, how are their communication skills? Right? If you want to be a scientist, you're gonna have to communicate that. Written, orally, government audiences, public audiences, other scientists. And that's what CPAS offers you, the chance to be a better scientist. My background is in astrophysics, hence my virtual starry background. I've come from astronomy, so I'm at Mount Shom Observatory, which is part of what we call the Research School of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and a lecturer and researcher here also at CPAS, so everyone you've seen. And it's bridging the gap between a scientist and a scientist who's better at communicating. That is one of my passions. It's working with all the colleagues you have just seen that are working with me about how to improve your skills through engaging with the government, to engaging with other scientists and doing your research better. You're gonna have to write it, you're gonna have to present it, and you're gonna have to publish it. That all involves communication. And these are the skills that helps you engage effectively as a researcher, no matter what you do, as a scientist, no matter what you do. And that is one of the great things I get to do, is to take and work with you, the potential students and the future students, and give you, through some of these courses like internships, practical experience. We have an entire observatory that engages with students, and we have actually had chances for you to be able to design and build your own experiments and ideas through Graham. We've had students through courses work with Lindy and Will on developing some more of those ideas. So that's one of the great things that I get to work on, is taking you, helping you on your journey and applying the skills you've just learned. A great example I love is one of the things that Graham and I did and a few others last year is what we called Space School. part of the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. There was a program designed by a third-year CPAS undergraduate student that was so successful, the Public Information and Outreach Officer of NASA was impressed. Now, NASA's a pretty good standard for science communication. I think we can all agree to it. When you impress them as an undergraduate, you're doing pretty good. And it wasn't me, it wasn't Graham, Graham's great, but it was Caitlin, a third-year student. That is the amazing thing you get to have as skills and as knowledge at CPAS. One of my other interests and work is in science fiction, something Lindy does as well. We have a course called Science and Popular Fiction, which, surprise, surprise, is about science and popular fiction. Does science and fiction have to be accurate? If I answered that question 5 years ago, I would have probably said something maybe you're saying right now, and that is yes. My answer today, and something you would learn if you take science and popular fiction, is no, it doesn't have to be. It has to be inspirational. You have to know who your audience is. You have to know what you're communicating, why you're communicating it, the reasons it's happening. So I've had an experience in actually consulting in science fiction movies and films based in Hollywood. And what it's actually is applying is that research, that academic knowledge that we've applied through science communication and all the great people you've just seen, and applying it in actual real world scenarios. And I think that is the great thing that CPAS offers, is the combination between world edge leading theory and how to communicate your science and the opportunities to practically apply that. And that's one of the great things I look forward to doing with you if you join us here. And I'll hand it over to Joan to finish up.
Well, I want to thank my colleagues. I think everybody listening can tell we're at least passionate about what we do. We do love it. And we'd like you to join us. So if you're an undergraduate student, if you're a scientist, thinking about studying in one of the sciences, and you're kind of thinking, maybe I need some more skills in science communication, you've heard we can offer that. If you're interested in some of the bigger ideas or advocacy that you've heard about here, come talk to us, because we've got a lot of that too. If you're a postgraduate, we have courses for postgraduate students in the sciences to kind of come through, take a course, see if you like it. But if what you've heard is really just speaking to your inner passion like it does to ours, that you're hearing that science communication might be a place for you, come talk to us about our undergraduate courses, our postgraduate courses, or if you're really wanting to kind of dive right in and join our vibrant PhD community, come talk to us about that too. So we do hope to see you. We're in the Peter Baum building on the lovely Canberra ANU campus, home of the Ngunnawal people, and we hope to see you very soon. Thank you.